Hello everybody, Roger here again, and today is our annual salal berry harvest. So I'm just going to go out in the woods here and show you what we do when we go out and pick salal berries. So yeah, let's go get at her. This is one of the off-roads on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. You can see it hasn't been upkept in many years, so you have to drive through this very carefully as it's right full of ruddy potholes and giant rocks and some of the old stumps that are laying underneath the road or jutting out, so you have to be very careful going through here. And my truck's just a two-wheel drive, so I can't go all the way down this road, but if you were to get down to the very end, there is some interesting Finnish places and place names that I will explore in a future video. But for now, I'm just going to our usual spot where we go and pick our annual harvest of salal berries. Down this road also are the remnants of some of the first trees logged on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. And you can see just how big the trees here on Malkosaari used to be. Now you can see growing all along the road here are salal bushes. Gaultheria shalon is the Latin name for it. And this is what the leaves look like. They're an evergreen plant, so the leaves are here all winter long. Now if I were to step into the forest here, you could see the old stumps from the original forest and the distance between the stumps indicating just how far apart the old growth trees once were. As I'm walking along the roadside here, you could see that the salal bushes are growing where the sunlight hits. And back in the day, when the forest canopy wasn't so dense as it is today, as you can see, the second growth trees make it quite a dense canopy. But back in the day, you could see the stumps here, there was distance between the trees as some of the younger trees die off and the dominant trees grow in place and get to be mature trees. But in between all those, back in the day when the original forest, old growth forest, was here, it would be right full of salal across most of the island. And any other places that weren't dense with forest were marshy swamps. When I was a teenager growing up here on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island, we used to pick salal stems and sell them by the bundle, like a handful of these stems. You would go down to the base of the stem like so, and get a nice, this is a little bit of a long stem, but you would put something like this as your back of the stem and pick a handful of these salal stems and lay them flat against each other until you got a handful of these. And the reason for picking them is because you could sell these bundles to buyers, and they take them to florists, and because these are an evergreen, they stay nice and green, and they flatten them in a press, and they last a long time in floral arrangements. So they put them in flowers and such. And now that I've pointed the plant out to you, you'll probably see them in some flower shops. So I stopped here to give a good example of just how thick the salal bushes could get in the forest. And the Finnish name for the salal bush was the nuisance bush. And I don't remember off the top of my head the Finnish word for the nuisance bush. But they called this the nuisance berry bush because it made walking through the forest very difficult. And as you could see off in the distance there in the forest, that's all salal. So walking through this, you could easily get lost and caught up in these bushes. And this is a quote directly from the Ica, translated into English. In all, the lush vegetation made a big impression. Some berry stems are up to 1 or 2 fathoms high. Even the blueberry stems are like little trees. The forest was full of berries. There were 2 kinds of berries that were ready for picking. The others were yellow, like the cloudberries in Finland. Others dark brown, like our Arctic bramble. The taste was similar as well. They grew in above the mentioned tall bushes. The nuisance bush, Salal, from last winter, turned out to be a berry bush as well. It is also the most important kind for us, because we have heard its berries can be preserved the longest. Besides, sheep can live on its juicy evergreen leaves all year round. We actually have the nuisance bush to thank for that. The island is now in our possession. Without it, it is likely that the Indians would have inhabited it. The same bush kept the state surveyor from getting anywhere farther from the shore. This forced him to report that the island soil was sandy. This kept the white farmers away. And that's a quote from the Ica about Salal bush. And for those of you who don't already know, the Ica newsletter was the first Finnish language newsletter printed in Canada, right here in Swantala and Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. And the farmhouse out at Rauhla, that was built in 1904, was intended to be where the Ica newspaper was going to be housed. And there off in the distance in our berry picking spot is my mother picking berries like we traditionally do every year. Now, my mom used to tell the story, and she still tells the story, about when she was a kid, when they lived near the graveyard on what we call the graveyard property, where she grew up in town of Swantala, where the old folks' home across from the cemetery in town on 2nd Street near the cemetery, that is called Harmony Glen, that back in the day when she was a kid was all these tall salal bushes. And she tells the story how she would jump from bush to bush with her friends like it was a trampoline back in the day when she was a kid growing up in Swantala. These here are salal berries. And you can see they grow in clusters on a stem. And how we pick them is we usually just break that stem off. It breaks off pretty easily until we get a bucket full. And then we pack them away and store them in the freezer until we're ready to make jellies from them. Now, I don't really particularly like the berries myself. They're okay, but they're not my favorite berry. However, when you juice them through a steam juicer like what we do, they make a really great tasting jelly. I'm just gonna try a salal berry here, just to give you an idea what they taste like. They're kind of crunchy, mushy insides. Again, a unique flavor, kind of sour, not too sour, just mildly sour. Mildly like a blueberry, but not quite either. Yeah, that's about all I could say, but I'm gonna break one open here. You can see kind of what it looks like on the inside. And they're supposed to be really good for you. It's supposed to be a super fruit, so it's supposed to be high in antioxidants. And yeah, natives used to pick these and harvest them and dry them out, and also use them for coloring. You get a dark blue or purplish color from the berries. Now, usually this spot we're at today is one of our really good berry picking spots we come to every year. However, this year doesn't look like it's a very good year for salal berries, as it doesn't look like there's too many here. But since we're here, we're going to be picking and see what we get. We also have a couple other backup spots that we go to every year in case this spot isn't too good. But since we're here, we might as well pick. But it doesn't look like it's a very good year for salal this year, unfortunately. Here we're getting into a better patch of salal berries. And all you have to do is just break off the stem. It comes off pretty easy. And you just break off the whole stem, because I run these through a steam juicer. So I just store the whole stems and all in the freezer. I also want to say about the salal bush is that it was later brought to the United Kingdom because of its hardiness, and they could shape it into hedges. And it is now an invasive species in the United Kingdom that originated here along the Pacific Northwest. We do a single harvest of salal once a year because you wait till all the berries ripen, and that's usually later in the season, come end of August or beginning of September. The salal berries, like you can see above my head here, are a common berry that the black bears will eat just before they go into hibernation. And there's usually an abundance of salal berries. And if you can't find any one year in one particular spot, it tends to flourish in another. So some years are better than others in certain locations. So we tend to be one of the only people that actually go out and forage berries and make something out of them. As I said before, we have our wild berry jam stand, and we make a Salal Berry Jelly out of the wild salal berries. And I'm just going to show you here what it's like trudging through a bush full of salal bushes, the nuisance bush. Not getting a lot here. Do you want to go to Big Lake? Okay, let's go check out Big Lake. And this is what it's like when you get in a dense patch of salal berries. They grow in these clusters, and you can see there's going to be quite an abundance of berries when you consider all the bushes that are in your area, just how much fruit you could get. So it looks like someone else was picking at our usual spot and got most of the berries, so we're going to some of our other picking grounds, and right now I'm just going to go check out Big Lake, or Isojärvi in Finnish. I'm just on the logging roads here near Big Lake, or Isojärvi, and just right there off to my left off the road is where we used to park and go in from there down the old road to Big Lake and pick our salal berries. So that's where we used to park up until last year. It looks like loggers or someone have taken out that parking spot and dredged this area out. And just down there looks like they're trying to drain a little bit of the overflow of Big Lake, because that's Big Lake there. You can hear people behind me there, because behind me is the exit of the Natoya Heritage Trail, which is somewhere we'll explore in a future video. But today, we're out picking salal berries. And I figured since we're here, I'll just take a quick peek down at Big Lake, or Isojärvi in Finnish, which means Big Lake. And here we are. Isojärvi, Big Lake. On Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. Now, when I was a kid here at Big Lake, over behind me there was this big tree, and it had this rope that went across the lake, and then people used to swing off that and go diving off into the lake over there. Also, in behind me somewhere, there's an old wrecked car that someone drove into the lake a long time ago, and it's just off the shore, but the waters are pretty murky here at the lake, so I can't show that to you. When you get into a real good patch like this, it's fairly easy picking. You just grab the stems and bend them backwards, and the stem with the berries comes right off. Soon enough, you'll get a full bucket. And like all berries, you have to keep moving the bushes around to get at the berries that are hiding in all the foliage. And you can see when you get into a good patch, there's an abundance of berries. Just picking salal berries with my mother up at Big Lake. So Yarvi.
Want to bug you up?
No, not at all. And you can see the rich purple reddish color that you get from picking salal berries. So this would be the coloration that natives would use to stain wood carvings and such, like masks in the past. So even though I have to go scouting for new berry picking grounds, there are a lot of logging roads on Malkosaari, Malcolm Island. And inevitably, you come across a patch where you get some salal berries. So I'm just going to keep picking till I get enough to store in our freezer for the season. And some of the places I have to go in order to find the salal berries, you can tell, is really scratching the sides of my truck, but good thing I just have a beater, so it doesn't really matter so much. But you still want to drive carefully when you're going through the bush like this. Well, that's all I got to say for today. I'm going to carry on and look for more ground so I could pick enough berries to make our jellies for this season. So if you want to follow along my video series, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. All right, ciao.